In the early 1860s, Sweden sat close to a Europe that changed fast. Railways expanded, mines dug deeper, cities demanded stone, metal and tunnels. All of it required one thing: controlled force. Alfred Nobel worked inside that pressure. He trained as a chemist, but he also came from a family business that already chased better explosives. He treated blasting not as chaos, but as a problem that could be solved. The Nobel family's work had tied chemistry to real contracts and real deadlines. Alfred learned quickly what customers wanted. They did not ask for bigger bangs. They asked for predictability. A charge that fired late or misfired cost money, and it killed workers. That demand shaped him. He read, tested, recorded, and tried again. Each improvement meant more rock moved, more shafts cut, and more projects that suddenly seemed possible. But the opportunity carried a trap. The more Europe depended on explosives, the less room remained for failure. Alfred Nobel pushed himself harder because the market rewarded anyone who could make blasting safer and easier. He did not chase danger for its own sake. He chased control. In that moment, his ambition and the continent's hunger lined up perfectly, and his laboratory work began to feel less like theory and more like a race. Nitroglycerin looked like an answer and a threat at the same time. It released enormous force, far more than the black powder people relied on, and it did it fast. Nobel did not treat that as a warning to stop. He treated it as a problem to solve. If this liquid could be made predictable, it could reshape mining, road building, and tunnels. That belief pulled him deeper into experiments. He tested how it behaved under heat, cold, shaking, and sudden impact, because those were the real conditions outside a lab. Every result mattered, even the ones that ended in failure. He adjusted mixtures, changed containers, and tried different ways to set it off on purpose. The goal stayed simple: make it explode only when commanded. But nitroglycerin kept proving it had its own rules, and they were brutal. The more he worked, the clearer the stakes became. A useful explosive could open mountains and speed up modern construction, but an unstable one could kill without warning. Nobel pushed anyway, because he believed control was possible and because the demand for a stronger blasting tool never slowed. Each careful trial carried the same tension: a step toward a breakthrough or a step toward disaster. He kept reaching for reliability in a substance built for chaos. His experiments moved from small tests to real production, and that changed the stakes. Nitroglycerin did not fail gently. It punished tiny mistakes with violence. Then the worst case happened. An unexpected explosion tore through the worksite. People were injured and lives were lost. For Nobel, it stopped being an abstract risk on paper. The danger crashed into his daily life, and it carried a personal cost he could not ignore. The accident did not just destroy equipment, it shattered trust inside the operation and around him. Authorities stepped in, and his work faced restrictions. Supporters hesitated. Neighbors feared what came next. Nobel had built his identity around solving problems through chemistry. But now, chemistry looked like a threat he had unleashed. The same substance he wanted to harness for mines and tunnels had proved it could kill without warning. He needed a new approach, fast. So he rethought everything: how it was handled, where it was tested, how it was stored, how a blast was triggered. The goal stayed the same: control. But the definition changed. It was no longer enough for nitroglycerin to work. It had to behave. He began searching for a way to make the explosive stable during transport and preparation, yet powerful when needed. After the catastrophe, safety stopped being a detail. It became the entire problem. After the loss, the problem stopped being whether nitroglycerin exploded. It always did. The problem became when and why. Nobel kept testing ways to make it behave because an explosive that went off by accident was useless to workers and lethal to everyone nearby. Small changes mattered. A drop too much, a shake too hard, a temperature shift, any of it could trigger disaster. He needed a way to hold its power still until the exact moment it was wanted. The breakthrough came when Nobel treated nitroglycerin less like a liquid to be carried and more like a force to be contained. He found that if it was absorbed into a porous material, it stopped sloshing, stopped spreading, and became far less sensitive to handling. It could be shaped, packed, and moved with a new level of predictability. The danger did not disappear, but the randomness did. For the first time, this explosive could be prepared in advance and delivered as a product. That change transformed everything. A controlled charge meant mining crews could plan blasts instead of fearing them. Builders could break rock where they needed, not where an accident decided. Nobel now had something he could manufacture, test, and repeat, each batch aiming for the same result. It was the stabilizing step he had chased since the beginning. Nitroglycerin turned from a laboratory threat into a practical tool. The world did not have a name for it yet, but it soon did. With the new mixture finally stable enough to handle, Nobel moved fast. He secured patents, not as a trophy, but as a way to control how the product spread and who made money from it. The name dynamite signaled a shift. This was no longer a dangerous lab experiment. It was a packaged tool. Once it could be shipped and stored, the world treated it differently. Industry adopted it with startling speed. Mining companies used it to break rock that had resisted older gunpowder charges. Railroad and tunnel crews cut through hills and mountains in less time, with fewer blasts needed for the same work. The job still carried risk, but the routine changed. Blasting became more planned, more measurable. Dynamite turned explosive force into something managers could schedule. That demand pushed Nobel onto an international stage. He licensed production, built networks of factories, and watched orders come in from far beyond Sweden. His name became tied to modern construction itself, quicker shafts, deeper mines, bigger projects that suddenly seemed possible. The payoff was enormous. Fame followed the money, and with it came a new reality. His fortune now depended on controlled destruction. Success brought attention, and not all of it came from mines and railways. Armies and weapons makers watched dynamite closely because it offered something they always wanted, more force in a smaller package. The same qualities that helped engineers cut through rock also helped soldiers break defenses. Orders expanded beyond civilian work. Reports spread about blasts used not to build, but to destroy. Once militaries showed interest, the meaning of dynamite changed in the public mind. It stopped sounding like a clever tool and started sounding like a threat. It also became attractive to people who were not armies at all. Groups and individuals who wanted attention, fear, or revenge. A product designed for controlled blasting now appeared in stories of attacks. The word dynamite became shorthand for terror. For Nobel, the shift cut deep. His wealth and fame still grew, but they carried a new stain. Every successful sale could be seen as progress, or as preparation for violence. He did not control how the world used what he built, yet his name followed every explosion. The invention that made him powerful also tied him to suffering. It cast a moral shadow over his triumph. Success did not make Nobel more social. It made him harder to reach. He moved often, worked constantly, and trusted few people, even as his name traveled everywhere. But the fame he could not control was the one tied to violence. Dynamite kept appearing in stories about conflict and fear. And Nobel, who once measured progress in practical results, started measuring something else too. In that state, he ran into a new kind of movement, organized peace advocacy. These were not private wishes or polite speeches. They were networks of people who treated peace like a public project, with meetings, campaigns, and clear demands. Nobel listened. He exchanged letters, read their arguments, and followed their efforts across Europe. It was a different world from patents and factories, and it pulled at him. Because the contradiction stayed simple and brutal. His inventions solved real problems for builders and miners, yet they also made killing easier when armies or extremists chose to use them. Nobel could not pretend he controlled that choice. He also could not accept that human progress ended in stronger destruction. So he turned inward, weighing what he had unleashed against what he still believed in, and he looked for a way to answer it. In 1888, Nobel received a shock he never expected to read about himself. A French newspaper published an obituary after his brother died, and it mixed up the names. The headline framed Nobel as a man who grew rich by finding new ways to kill. It reduced his life to one sentence: profit, explosives, death. The world, it seemed, already decided what he stood for. That mistake landed because it matched the fear dynamite now carried. Nobel knew his inventions served mines and tunnels, but he also watched them slide into threats, sabotage, and military plans. The obituary did not mention his hopes for progress. It did not care about intentions. It judged outcomes. And it hinted at something worse, that history would remember him without asking him what he meant. Nobel did not answer with speeches or public defenses. He treated the obituary like a preview of his own ending, and he decided he needed leverage over the final story. If his name was going to survive him, it had to point somewhere else. He started shaping a plan that used the thing he controlled best, his fortune, to reward work that clearly helped humanity. He no longer trusted chance to fix his reputation. If the world kept linking his name to death, he needed something stronger than a statement or a donation. He used the one tool he still controlled completely, his will. In it, he redirected the fortune built on blasting power into a plan that outlived him. It was simple and bold. His money no longer existed just to grow. It existed to steer memory. He laid out prizes that rewarded work he believed actually moved humanity forward. Not vague praise, but clear categories and clear standards, discoveries in science, advances in medicine, achievements in literature, and efforts that improved human life. Then he added the most surprising one. He ordered a prize for peace, aimed at people who reduced conflict, built cooperation, and pushed nations away from war. He turned private wealth into a permanent public reward system. That decision changed what his fortune meant. The same money that came from controlled explosions now funded recognition for the opposite idea: restraint, healing, understanding. It did not erase dynamite, and it did not undo the ways explosives had been used. But it created an institution that kept repeating a message he could not deliver alone. Year after year, it pointed attention toward people who benefited humanity. He locked that promise into law. In the modern world, the word dynamite still carried a punch. People used it as shorthand for sudden destruction, even when they never saw a real stick of it. It showed up in headlines, in crime stories, in everyday speech, as a quick way to say something could blow apart. The invention escaped its original purpose and became a symbol. That symbol stayed tied to Nobel's name. At the same time, another part of that name traveled in the opposite direction. The Nobel Peace Prize grew into one of the most visible honors on Earth. It did not reward force or clever engineering. It rewarded restraint, negotiation, and the slow work of reducing harm. Each time it was announced, it reminded the public that Nobel's wealth did not end as private comfort. It became a public signal about what mattered. So his legacy sat on a sharp contrast that never really softened. A young inventor once chased a controlled explosion, convinced that discipline and science could make violence manageable. The world then used that power in ways that went far beyond his hopes. And yet his fortune also financed a prize that pointed toward peace as a goal worth celebrating. One name ended up meaning two things at once.